Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Witty Writers Show. We are live here on Facebook and YouTube, and thank you for joining us because today I have the fantastic David McCaffrey joined me. Hello, David.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I've been so excited today because I'm talking to a fellow Brit.
Yes, indeed. From the northeast of England, no less.
I know, so we both talk funny.
Yeah, people do think I'm Australian if I'm abroad.
Do you know, I get that all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And it's funny because for those who are just joining us, the British accent and the Australian accent are actually quite different if you listen to them next to each other, especially as Australians tend to go up octaves as they're talking. Yeah, and occasionally I get that, are you from South Africa? And I go, nope. But but maybe a bit closer than Australia. I don't know. We've got lots of people joining us already, David. So I'm going to quickly pop them up because they're all saying hello to you. We've got Rochelle who's joined us. She says hello.
Rochelle.
Another fabulous author, I have to say. We've also got Heather who's joined us. She says hello to you both from Gemma and I. Heather has a fantastic book club here on Facebook. So if you haven't joined already, please join.
Making a note.
Fantastic book club. It's lovely. And we've also got Donna who's joined us.
Hello, Donna.
You
Hi,
do.
Donna.
Fabulous. She says, good evening, Beth. And hey, lovely David. And we've also got James. He's joined us. He says, nah, this guy sounds like John Lennon. Oh, there's a compliment and a half.
That is a compliment. Thank you, James.
We'll take that all day long, James.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Now, David, I've been so excited to interview you because the more I researched you, the more fascinated I became. Your books are absolutely amazing. I just want to give our viewers some idea because you've published, I think it's over 7 novels right now.
Yes.
And your ratings, I checked, your ratings on Goodreads is absolutely phenomenal. It's like 4.09. Hang on, yeah, 4.9. 4.09. I'll get there in the end.
Yeah.
And out of 5, that is absolutely amazing. That's well above average for any author. So, round of applause.
Thank you.
It was fantastic. Now, your books are crime, psychology, thriller books, really, really gripping. And when I was reading the reviews for your books, you really do knock readers' socks off, I have to say. Now, I want to go back to when you started because you're actually a highly qualified nurse, and that's been your main job. So, what inspired you to actually start writing?
The birth of my eldest son, actually, where I did write when I was younger. I used to enter competitions in local libraries, and I've told this story before. I won a competition once, writing a story about a witch who was afraid of heights, so she couldn't fly on a broomstick, and I won some felt tip pens.
I love that.
Yeah. And then, so I always loved writing, and you remember the television series V in the 80s?
Yes.
Yeah, with the green baby and all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember. I watched that show.
Yeah. I would write my own follow-ups to that and things. So I always liked creative, kind of writing. But as sometimes happens, life gets in the way and you go off in different directions. And I went into nursing ultimately, and never thought any more about it. And then when my eldest son was born, for some bizarre reason, I had this idea in my head, and I felt inspired to write it down. And his mum, my partner at the time, I said to her, I'm just going to go upstairs for a few hours and write something down. She gave me a bemused look. And when I came down with what I'd written, I showed it to Vicky. And if she'd have laughed, I probably would have never done it again. But Vicky was really supportive and encouraging about what I'd written. And it kind of just spurred me on from there. And ultimately, I was lucky enough to have Steve Alten, who's a huge author in America. He's not so well known over here, but for anyone who's seen the film The Meg about the big shark with Jason Statham, it was his book that it was based on. And he has a writing coach program every year. And I was fortunate enough to be taken on by a client, as a client by him. And he was fantastic in teaching me all sorts of creative tips and what to do, what not to do, pitfalls to avoid, and really, really helped hone what ultimately became Hellbound, my first book as an author, and it kind of went from there.
That's just amazing, isn't it? There's something to be said for reaching out and gaining knowledge from others who have been there, done it, and got the t-shirt.
Yeah.
Because when you go into the book business blind, there's so many useless pieces of information out there that are just wasted time. So having somebody, even if they're a few years ahead of you, they've already learned so much more, haven't they? And they've gained so much experience, and they can tell you, don't do this and don't try that because it's a waste of energy and blah, blah, blah. So that's absolutely fantastic for you to have had that opportunity. That's just brilliant.
He was wonderful. I mean, he was very, very, we became friends ultimately. We share emails and things about non-book related things, but he was fantastic, but very strict. I won't swear, but occasionally I'd send a chapter for him to look at and edit, and I'd get an email back saying, "What the is this? Do it again," in capitals. And Vicky would read it and she'd be like, "Oh my God, I'd be so gutted if somebody did that." And I'm like, no, because I'm going to do it better. And he just kept inspiring me to push myself, which ordinarily I probably wouldn't have done. And ultimately, he was the first man in my life to say he was proud of me, because something my dad never did. So it meant an awful lot. It was really special.
Yeah, that's just fantastic. I think we all need at least one person in our lives who's going to tell us straight up what's shit or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you need that honesty, don't you? At the end of the day, constructive criticism is invaluable, but also as an author, we need to learn to have a thick skin and know when to take constructive criticism seriously.
Absolutely.
Because it does go a long, long way. We've got some more people who's joined us. I'm just going to quickly pop them on the screen for you, David. We've also got CJ. She says, "Hey, thank you for joining us, darling." Another amazing author. We've also got Heather Shepherd. She says, "Hello from California."
Hi, Heather.
We've also got the fabulous Claire. She says,
"Hi,
Beth. Hi, David. Hope you are both well." We are. Thank you, darling. Although I do sound a bit huskier than normal, I'm afraid. I've had a bit of a cold. Over Christmas, David, I completely lost my voice. Literally gone. I could literally do a whisper. And my husband was like, "Yes."
Oh, I can. Kelly never stops talking and she never loses her voice.
I lost mine completely. I tried to ring up my mum to wish her, Merry Christmas and everything. And literally it was a strained whisper. It was pretty pathetic, I've got to tell you, but never mind. We've also got the fabulous Josephine. She says, "Hello, here, late per usual." Bless her.
Hello, Josephine.
Well, Josephine's joining us on the show this Thursday, so I hope she won't be late then.
I will tune in.
She won't. I know she won't. Bless her. James says, the program where the good-looking alien swallowed the guinea pig. Yes,
that's the one.
I remember that. Yes.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Do you know what? It's funny, isn't it? When you are into shows when they first come out and you think, "Oh, this is brilliant. Special effects are fantastic." And then you look back, 10 years plus later and you think, "Oh,
dated."
God.
Yeah.
Our standards have gone so high now. Josephine says, "Not sure what is happening, but I may be but maybe 10 words, then it keeps freezing. Hopefully it will get better as it goes on." Oh, okay. Is anybody else having trouble with our signal? Please let us know. It might just be Josephine's area, but please let us know. Donna says it's also nice when somebody says they are proud of you. Nothing beats that. Agreed. I agreed. And Heather says, Josephine, it's your connection possibly perfect here. Okay, so we'll play it by ear. I think it's very important, isn't it, as an author to have as much support from friends and family as you can get. Having said that, and I don't know whether you've experienced this, but I know many authors who have, sometimes you do get more support from complete strangers than people you've known for years. But that's the same. That's not just the same for authors. I think that's true for anybody who's self-employed, has their own business. Is nothing personal, and this is what authors need to remember. It is never personal. Everybody is wrapped up in their own little bubble, in their own little world, with their own families and businesses and work and everything else. And it does take effort to be very supportive of somebody else.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's when somebody gets in from work or they've dealt with their family and everything else, it's not always their priority. So it's never personal. But I found the more engaging we are, the more feedback and engagement we get back. Would you say you found the same as an author, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found it difficult at first because I'm really self-conscious. I don't like talking about myself, and certainly don't like selling myself. But I realized early on, and I'm not a massive fan of social media as such, although I appreciate the wonderful things it's allowed us to do, during the pandemic, being able to speak to people on the other side of the world that we couldn't have seen otherwise, or family that were around the corner. I understand all of that, but I'm just not a fan. But I appreciated it was a necessary evil to use that mechanic to engage people. I appreciate it wasn't around when Stephen King started writing, and James Herbert, and Agatha Christie, but the world's changed, and I realized that you have to. I found not only it's less talking about yourself and more supporting other authors, because I found that whole pay it forward thing works, and I like trying to do that as a person anyway, because I'd rather talk about and sell anyone else other than myself. But I found that by default, that has reciprocal,
It does.
after effects.
Yeah, it does. It does have that knock-on effect, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think, because the more you share of other people's work, the more that likely they are to share yours, and it's a two-way street, isn't it? Which is really, really helpful, especially for Facebook groups, etc. Because a lot of the Facebook groups for authors won't let you self-promote. So if you're promoting others and they're promoting you, it's a really, really good way of getting noticed, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I love that. And I know you do a lot for other authors, which we will talk about as well. But getting back to your first book, because you published Hellbound a number of years ago. When was that? 2015?
Yes, 2015, November 2015.
So where did the inspiration come from for Hellbound? And tell us a bit about your story.
The inspiration came from Kung Fu Panda.
No, excuse the language. No shit. Kung Fu Panda.
No, it did. And forgive anyone who might have read this before, because I have mentioned it a long time ago. But it was Kung Fu Panda. When I'd written this idea, which ultimately ended up having nothing to do with the story that Hellbound became, but the aim was to. I'd always been fascinated by. I did criminology just in my own time at university, and I've always been fascinated by true crime stories and that darker side of nature. As abhorrent as it is, it's fascinating as well that people can behave this way or can treat others that way, and the ramifications of that. So, but I was interested in if you could make someone who was remorseless feel remorse, I was fascinated by that concept of if it was possible, and if it was possible, how would you do it? You couldn't expose someone to more darkness because that would just harden the resolve. So what if you exposed them to the exact opposite: love, empathy, compassion, caring, etc.? Yes, it wouldn't change their personality, but it might have resonance somewhere. And when I was watching Kung Fu Panda with my son, you've got Po, who's this most unlikely protagonist, and you've got, I can't remember the name of the tiger, but they're like this ultimate evil in that world of Kung Fu Panda. And that idea resonated with me. So I took that concept and created characters using that idea of unlikely and ultimate evil, and then wrapped it around how would you make the ultimate evil feel remorse?
That is fascinating. It truly blows my mind. It really does. How we creative people find our inspiration. And I think that's fantastic. That's something, so normal, as in, watching a movie with your son, was able to spark something that has now led to 3 books in that series.
Thus far, yeah.
That's absolutely phenomenal, and I'm like you, I'm a massive fan of anything to do with, the criminal mind and the psychology of evil people. I love finding out why they've become the way they have, how they get caught, especially I love finding out how these people get caught. I love forensics. So I'm a bit of a fan like you. And it's brilliant that you was able to create a masterpiece from Kung Fu Panda. That's absolutely brilliant. That's made my day. But it's amazing, isn't it? How inspiration can just
Oh yeah, it's
set
bizarre.
you off. It's amazing. So how different was it for you from writing Hellbound to then going from there to book 2, which was In Extremis?
In extremis, yeah.
In
Uh, it, with Hellbound, I knew, outside of all the things we've already discussed, I knew I couldn't do better than anyone who wrote in that genre. Thomas Harris, L.J. Ross, loads of people who write procedural thrillers and crime thrillers, etc. So I wanted to do completely different. Now I appreciate. I've started to wonder if that was a bit selfish as an author, because there's a certain love of certain genres of books, and clever, talented authors tap into that people love reading. But because I'm so stubborn, I thought, I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. I want to do this because I would find this fascinating, and then hopefully there'll be 9 people in the world that will read it and find it fascinating as well. So I was quite insistent on doing something different because I couldn't do as good. And I do think Hellbound still stands as something quite different when you read it. But feeding on from that, I've always been fascinated by Jack the Ripper, and my brain was going, how can I make that world of 1888 fit into this universe that I've just created? So, and I've always been fascinated by the journal of Jack the Ripper that purportedly James Maybrick wrote, whether he was, whether he wasn't, whether it's forged, whether it wasn't, but that whole controversy about that. So I imagined what happens if the pages that they said were ripped from that journal were found. What would they say? So I made them up. I spent ages reading how he'd written and his syntax and his language, and I wrote these imaginary pieces of this journal that might have existed that linked perfectly into what they found. And I used that as a benchmark for tying it into an organization at its inception that ultimately, by the time you get to Hellbound, was powerful in the fact that it used its benevolence for less than benevolent means.
That is absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love that. I've watched so many documentaries on the Ripper.
Oh yeah, I find it fascinating.
So many. For you to actually do that, that's just absolutely fantastic. That must have taken you so long to try and emulate somebody's writing style and mannerisms and that.
It was quite immersive. I actually sent it to there's a psychologist here. He's written lots of crime books, the names of which I can't remember, and he's done series. He's called David Cantor, and he's a big criminal profiler, and based in the southeast of England. And I actually sent him them to say, you know, if you get the chance and you're bored for 5 minutes, would you have a look over this, just to see if I was anywhere in the right ballpark? And it was nice to know that I was, although Kelly found it quite disturbing that I was in that ballpark. So
that's awesome, though. I mean, and what a way to promote your books as well. You know,
yeah.
If that was me, I'd be all over that. I'd be plastering that everywhere. The Lost Ripper pages. You know, because it's a great gimmick for
I never thought of that, actually.
Well, I mean,
that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I would. This is why I'm good at my job, David.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
This is why you inspire me.
I also sent a copy of it to Shirley Harrison, was the author who wrote the book on the Diary of Jack the Ripper back in 1994. So I contacted her and we exchanged a few emails. She was lovely, and I asked her permission to say, you know, would it be okay with you? And then I to use that as a reference point. And then I also wrote to, I think it's Hodder Stoughton that owned the rights to the journal that was found, whoever it was. And I asked if I could use any of the journal, and they obviously tell you how much is fair usage. So I did it that way, and then I sent Shirley Harrison a copy of the book, just to say thank you, and met her at a Jack the Ripper convention, oddly. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience.
That is amazing. Well, we'll have to have a chat, you and I, after the show, and I can give you some more ideas, because that's what I'm good at. We've got some more people who've joined us as well. So let's have a look here. We've also got, we've got my mum. She says, hi. Happy birthday, Mum. My mum's birthday today. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Love you, best mum ever. Claire says, who is your favorite fictional villain? Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, I can never remember the name. But I can never remember the name, and I should, because it's fame. Out of The Man in the Iron Mask.
Oh,
who's the man that takes his life? I should remember. It's such a classic book.
Oh my gosh!
And then the Count of Monte Cristo as well. I like those kind of archetypal villains who had that much of an impact. I can't remember the names.
My husband calls me Dory. My memory's horrendous.
So yes, Claire, that vague response is my favorite fiction.
I bet somebody's Googling it for us right now. So
thank you.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Claire says she read Hellbound. It was brilliant. There we go. Another endorsement. Your reviews. Can I just tell everybody, because your reviews are absolutely phenomenal. Hellbound has an average rating of 4.02 out of 5, which is phenomenal. And then In Extremis, which is novel 2 in the series, is 4.22 out of 5, which is amazing. And then the third novel in your trilogy is called Nameless, and that's 4.31 out of 5 rating. Wow. So
it's only out of 5 people who read it, though.
You lie like a cheap Japanese watch. It says 190 ratings.
No, I know.
Mr. McCaffrey. So there we go. I'll tell you, and the reviews are just glowing. They really, really are. CJ says, I totally love that. Let's have a look. Heather says, I worked on Kung Fu.
Cool. No way.
Is awesome. That is awesome. We've also got the amazing author Stephanie Nietzsche. She's joined us. Hello,
Stephanie.
And we've got Dawn who's joined us. She says, hello, Beth and David from Northeast UK.
Hello, Dawn.
Hello, darling. Oh, and Donna, she's so sweet. She says, happy birthday, Griffin. Thank you. My mum appreciates that, I'm sure. Bless her. Now, how has your writing process gone from writing Hellbound to now? I mean, you must have learnt so much, because you've written a series called The Warmest Place to Hide.
Yes.
And you've also written Do Not Harm, which is a completely different type of book, isn't it? Which we'll go into in a second. But how has your writing style and everything changed? And what do you think are the most important things that you've learned as an author?
Going backwards, the most important thing I think I've learned is never shortchange a reader, because they'll know if you haven't put the research in and made the effort. And I appreciate that, although, you know, the Hellbound anthology as it is psychological thrillers, and yes, there is a suspension of disbelief to a certain extent, because I know there's no prison on, you know, in Ireland, etc. But I think it's do your research. So even for that fictional aspect of a story, you can still imbue it with sounds and smells and feelings and syntax and language to make it as real as possible. And I think readers appreciate that, because they know if you shortchange them in those things, and it's a bit of an insult, I think, to someone's intelligence if you try and do that. My writing process actually hasn't changed particularly from the beginning, apart from with Do No Harm, because the subject matter was different and the approach to it was different. But again, going all the way back to being mentored by Steve, everyone has their own way of plotting books. He taught me to use a beat sheet, where, for those of you, I don't mean to patronize anyone, but for those of you who don't know, with you just do a few bullet points for each chapter to have the basic beats of the story, and then once you're happy with how your story is going to look, you kind of go in and fill in the blanks with detail and the conversations. And that way, because they're bullet points, you can look at it at a glance and move bits about. If you think it's too slow, too fast, that bit works better there. And ultimately you end up possibly veering off as you get ideas as you're writing, but you kind of end up staying within the same framework ultimately. And that's still my process. I wasn't very good at planning until that, but it's one of those things that becomes a habit that you never want to break.
I think it's a really, really good idea, especially for new authors, because, you know, when you first start out, and I'm sure you felt the same way, you've got so much going on in your brain. You know, all these characters are suddenly talking to you, and all these ideas are suddenly popping in your head. And I think that's a really, really good way of doing it, is putting down key elements that you want in those chapters. It's really, really helpful. And something that I learnt after I wrote my first one is having a book Bible as well, with all your characters' names, their traits, their physical descriptions. And if you can, I found that images, if you can find an image similar to how you picture your character, it's a really good way of
I agree,
making them more real. And then having them on a board, say, oh yeah, okay, so I can just picture her saying that with that look, because you've got something visual to look at. It's amazing, isn't it, how things develop and how much you learn from your first book to your second book to your third book, and so on and so on and so on. It's quite mind-blowing.
It's a fantastic, you learn a lot about your I learned a lot about your own strengths and weaknesses in writing. I'm not very good at writing funny. I have the utmost respect for people that can write funny, where you read it and it's laugh out loud funny, because I can't really do that. My brain doesn't work that way. So you learn the things that possibly you lean slightly more towards in the strength side of creativity than other things. And sex scenes, I'm not. That was one of the most difficult things I've ever written in my life. To not make it 50 Shades of Grey and cheesy, and not that I'm knocking 50 Shades of Grey, but to write sex scenes and not be explicit, but
there's a fine line, isn't there, trying to make it realistic without being over the top, but just giving enough description where they know your reader knows what's going on without being too overly descriptive. But I mean, I think it's fantastic how you've not been afraid to be out of the box with your approach to your books and not being afraid to do something different. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think any of us who try and do something a little bit different should really promote the fact that we are different. I mean, as you know, I mean, my books are published in adult and young adult editions. And people, friends and family thought I was mad for doing that.
Fantastic idea. I think it's genius.
But sometimes as you said, you have to think outside the box. You have to stand out. You have to do something that is different from everybody else, because people are always looking for something fresh and new and different. And you never know what the next trend is going to be.
No.
As an author, we always try to have something go viral, something that's going to catch people's attention and start trending, because that's the only way we're going to get noticed, isn't it?
It's true.
Keep promoting ourselves and trying to do it differently. We've got lots more comments. So I'm going to pop them up. If you have any questions for David, please put them in the comments and I will pop them up so he can read them. Let's have a look. So Donna says, I'm always telling David off for being down on himself.
Yes, that's very true.
Do you know what? But David, so many authors are introverts, and we go through years of this imposter syndrome, don't we, where we think we're not as good as anybody else.
That's true.
I'm not bad, but I'm not as better than everyone. It's a real issue. But I do say to my clients, if they feel uncomfortable promoting themselves, then promote themselves as a third party. I've got clients who actually I've persuaded them to create a separate account as their personal assistant, so that it's their personal assistant that's doing all the promoting, so they can do it without feeling like they're blowing their own trumpet. And it just
Hugh Grant had a funny story about that when he was on a talk. I think it was Graham Norton years ago. He said that he got rid of his agent and he he was his own agent and would email as someone else for scripts and things because it took the complication out of it. And he said it worked fine until one night when he was drunk and he answered the phone as himself when they were wanting to speak to this person, and it blew his cover. But I can see the logic in having a third person. It kind of takes you abstractly out of the situation, doesn't it?
It does. It allows you to do what you need to do without being in the spotlight. But also from I can tell you from a personal note, if you have any type of assistant responding to messages and stuff like that on your behalf, it's very, very helpful, especially if you're getting inundated with spam, awkward messages that aren't particularly not nasty, but just make you uncomfortable or whatever. You can just respond as a PA, and it takes any awkwardness off you then. So you can just be straightforward and go, no, thank you. Without feeling bad. We've also got Nancy who's joined us. She says, hi, Beth, open Facebook. And there you are. Hi, David.
Hi, Nancy.
We like to be efficient. We do. Josephine says, swapped to my phone. It's playing up on here. So she's back. She says she uses a book Bible, and then I'm not scrolling through everything I've written, looking for what color eyes they have, etc. Yes, I learned that
I can
lesson.
relate.
I learned that
Kelly,
lesson.
when she read Hellbound, she spotted timelines. She's very good at dates and timelines, and she spotted where my timelines were wrong date-wise. And also, she kept saying, "How tall is he? What colour are his eyes? What's he called? Because you called him something else here." I'm like, "Oh, right, okay."
This is why book Bibles are so important.
They are.
But also for our new authors who are watching, you can use various apps as well. You can find them online, Google search them, and I think Scrivener's one of them. But you can use apps like that help you with your timelines, character description, and literally you can have like tabs open for each character with all their details in, so you don't lose any of it. So there are ways and means to save yourselves lots of time, etc. Another question from Claire. She says, what would be your best advice to someone who would love to put their story out there, but is suffering from the infamous imposter syndrome?
It's good. It's a really good question.
It is a good question.
I always think one way is to write it under a pseudonym, which I did toy with the idea of doing something different with my name, because I have an unfortunate middle name of Vincent Michael, which I don't like. But
I quite like that.
I didn't mind it until I made the mistake of putting it down on my university application for nursing, and then 3 years later, I didn't realize that when they call you out in the middle of the hall to give you a certificate when you've got your gown and all that stuff on, they say your full name, and I could have died. But
I think it makes you like a doctor.
I certainly write like one. Yeah, so I putting it out under a pseudonym, and I know this is hard. I appreciate it's hard, but writing what you want, the story that you want to tell, and trying to get out of the mindset of it not being, because there's millions of books. Certainly if you write in crime, for example, there's millions of books on Kindle, and you really have to not necessarily have something special, because so many of them are, and anyone who writes anything, I think it's a fantastic achievement, even if it never gets published, because to write a book is an amazing achievement that I don't think people realize how amazing it is to have written a story and created whatever world or characters have been. But it's difficult to get something to stand out in the crowd when you're writing a genre that's overpopulated because it's so popular. So I think it's important to really get that support and encouragement just to do it, because there will be someone that will read what you've written and think it's wonderful. It'll take them somewhere else for a few days, or it'll make them fall in love with their character for life, or they'll be thrilled or gripped or sad. I think you need that support mechanism to not worry about what other people will think. I used to obsessively check reviews when I was very first published, and now I rarely even give them a look. Not because I think I get that many or they're so good, just it became less about what people thought and just what I was happy writing about, to the point that if I got bad reviews, which everyone does, I once got one that said, "What a pity." That was it. And one star, "What a pity." And every time someone's given me constructive criticism, I've looked at it and thought, that's a really good point, actually. I'll have to make note of that for next time I write. And there's always been something to get from it. But when someone writes that, it makes me chuckle, because I can't use that. That's not helpful. Or 1 star, book didn't arrive. That's not my fault. Why is that my fault? So I find them amusing now. Or someone once said, "Oh, it was terrible. I had to force myself to read it all to the end." Yeah, but you read it to the end, though.
Yeah. Bet you bought the next one too.
Yeah. So I do get the imposter thing, but I think it's such a talent to have written anything. People really need to try and believe and get that support in their own.
I agree, and I think you have to have the right mindset, don't you? At the
Yeah.
end of the day, um, you know, at the end of the day, life is worth living. We only get one life. Life is short. You never know what's around the corner. So if you are thinking about writing a book, write it.
Hmm.
You know, what have you got to lose? Nothing.
Absolutely.
You know, I always think it's better to regret something you've done and something you've tried than something you haven't. There is
Yeah.
nothing worse than going through life going, "Oh, I wish I'd have done that. I wish I'd have tried that." You know, it's better to know and
Hmm.
give it a go and give it your best shot. And I think, you know, logically, storytelling is the oldest thing ever. You
Absolutely.
know, when you look at, the ancient civilizations, they would sit around the fire and tell stories that were passed down and passed down and passed down. It's the oldest craft, storytelling and painting and drawing. They are the oldest arts going. So embrace it, go for it, have your best shot.
Absolutely.
And you're right. We do surprise ourselves, don't we, when we give something a shot. And there's so much of a support system, especially online, as you said.
There is.
There's writers groups, there's writers forums. There's my group, Write Better, Author Smarter, and there are also fantastic publishing companies out there who are very supportive,
Hmm.
which leads me nicely
Nice,
uh,
nice.
very smoothly, to David's publishing company, which is BNBS Books, which is Britain's next bestseller independent publisher.
Okay.
Um, I handled that so smoothly. I'm quite impressed.
You did. That was very
Quite
good. I
impressed
was
with
impressed.
myself. Because you've done, my gosh, you've done so much to help other authors, but you actually decided to go one step further, didn't you, David, and actually start your own publishing company?
But Kelly and I did, although we inherited it from the lady that published Hellbound. Without labouring the point and boring anyone, I had 65 literary agent rejections for Hellbound, which is why I was fascinated when I was listening to you talk the other week with the father and the son.
Oh, Mark Gottlieb
Yes,
and Robert
yeah.
Gottlieb from
Listening to what they had to say, I found it fascinating because
they're
the only
fantastic.
thing I got from my literary submissions was that I beat Stephen King. I think he got 35 something for Carrie, and I was like, I got more than Stephen King. Although obviously Carrie's a fantastic book. And then I'd almost given up, and I saw an advert from this new company called Britain's Next Bestseller in the writing magazine, and I thought, oh, I'll send it there. I've got nothing to lose. And Muriel, who owned the company at the time, loved it and took it on, and it was published. And then a year or so after that, Kelly and I had done a lot to support other authors who had books with Britain's Next Bestseller, because again, I'd rather talk about someone else than myself. And Muriel rang Kelly and I and said, would you be interested in taking over the company? And I was like, we're nurses. I know nothing about publishing. I literally thought you just wrote it on Word and that was how it got published. I didn't realize how intricate it is at the time, in my own naivety. And Kelly was the one that said, no, you have to do this, David, because if you turn it down, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. So we did, and then took what Muriel had created and kind of evolved it from there. We kept a lot of her ethos that you split any royalties 50-50, because the way Kelly and I see it is no one should profit from a dream, so that if they don't make money, we don't make money.
Yeah.
And we invest in it for the proofreading and the cover design and things. So you always want someone to be successful, but if they're not, they we will happily return their rights, and they can go off and explore, all the other facets of publishing, and they won't have lost money. No one should ever profit from someone's dream. I think it's abhorrent that you have to pay £2,000 up front to a company to publish a book. And if we're just a stepping stone to someone getting their book out in the world and then they move on to other things, that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. And it has allowed us to, over the years, evolve to, we're publishing Michael Brandon's autobiography, Michael Brandon of Dempsey and Makepeace fame in the UK, but obviously
I love
Michael,
Joe.
yeah. But obviously
Crush on
Michael's,
that man.
well, I think myself and lots of men had the biggest crush on Glynis, who's obviously his wife now. They've been married for 31 years, I think. So it led to that. And the opportunities that opened up. But we always believed in it, Kelly and I. We always believed in it. And then the amount of you're looking at people's dreams, and when you get something submitted, you want to give it the best care and attention you possibly can.
Yeah.
And if someone decides that you're not the right fit for them, which I get, because I tried different things when I was writing and different publishing avenues, because you learn so much from it. It's great to just been a tiny part in someone's writing career. We find it amazing, and it's quite humbling, really.
I really wish that there were more publishing companies like yours. I really do, David, because I've lost count how many emails and messages I've received from authors who have gone to some of these small presses, as you said, spent 2 or 3, if not more, thousand, and literally have got nothing. They've got a pretty book, but no reviews, no sales, no royalties, and and no power. They're stuck in contracts where then they've got no control. And I think it's such a great thing that you've got good relationships with the authors that you work with, where everything is talked about, discussed, the processes are explained. They've got, that they've got a real relationship with you.
We try to, and I mean, we're Kelly and I are always honest as well if we've made mistakes, because we've learned so much over the past 5-6 years since we took over the company. But we were nurses, and there was a lot to learn in a short space of time. And sometimes you get things wrong, or you haven't quite predicted things the way that possibly you should have done. And we're always open and honest and say, we apologize if that wasn't to your expectations, but from that we have learned this. And because I also think being honest is vital, to own something that you might get wrong and say, but this is what we learned from that experience. Because at the end of the day, although we're not one of the big 5 and we can't offer someone massive advances in royalties and things, but you can give people integrity and honesty, and sometimes that goes a long way to establishing a reputation that you're proud of, more than making a lot of money, which is always nice, I know, but that's not the reason we do it. And that's probably an ethos that comes from nursing. You certainly don't become a nurse to be rich. You do it because you have a passion for it. And it's the same we just think we're honored to be a little stepping stone in someone's creative journey.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And you do an amazing job, because I mean, it's the book world and the book business is such a fluid business. It's constantly changing and moving, and it only takes one book to make a massive splash and change the whole trend of the book industry. So you just never know what's going to happen.
No, absolutely not.
You really, really don't. Okay, let's have a look. Heather says, I am working on a chapter book, but I am new at this medium. How do you organize it all before you write? I have ghosts of the piece in my head. Do you think to organize imagination? Oh, I am not reading this correctly at all. Do you think you should organize before the bullet points? I expect myself to just write linear, but figure that is making it hard on myself. That's a tricky one, I have to tell you, Heather, and I don't know whether David will agree, but I think we all have different writing methods, shall I say. And it's all about finding your own. It's whatever works for the individual. What do you think, David?
No, I agree.
It's
I
so
agree.
different, isn't it? I mean, my writing style for book one, I just winged it completely because I had no clue what I was doing. Book two, I tried to be really structured. I watched far too many videos and listened to far too many people trying to give me advice. Completely ruined my flow and creativity. Completely, I stalled, and then I just went threw out all my notes and stuff, and I just went back to do my own thing and winging it. But it's very individual, isn't it? I think it all depends on the
Yeah,
type of personality
absolutely.
you are, how your own brain works, and just figuring out in yourself what is best for you. There's
Yeah,
no right
absolutely.
and wrong way, is there, David?
No, not at all. I mean, I have quite a messy brain, so the bullet point thing allows me to keep the salient, keep it simple for the salient points, and then the messiness of my creativity can then go and fill in the blanks afterwards. But I would never say to anyone that beat sheets are the way to do it, because you're absolutely right. That works for me, and obviously it worked for Steve Alten because it was his advice. But I know I've seen Lee Russell, when Lee puts posts on, she has some sort of scribbled mind map almost of things, and some people use post-it notes, and it does depend on how you process and unload the information. And I certainly don't think being linear is necessary either, because I had the ending of Hellbound long before I had the rest of the story, because I just had this ending that I absolutely wanted to do. And the rest of the story led into that. So I absolutely agree. It's just about finding your own way of organizing the mess
Yeah.
in your head of
It's
ideas.
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, we all learn differently when we're at school. You know, I learned very differently from my friends. You know, some things I picked up really, really quickly. Other things took me a while longer. But we are all very, very individual in how we process. So yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. Donna says Vincent is cool, kind of gangster. I like that, kind of gangster. Oh God, do they? My middle name is Lorraine. Hopefully, I will graduate this year. Too late to take it away. Oh, Lorraine's a nice name.
Lorraine
I
is a nice
like
name.
it. It's very nice.
Lorraine's a friendly name that you want to have a cup of tea and
Yes.
biscuits with.
Do you know, it always reminds me of that posh bird on that commercial. Lorraine.
Luton Airport, that one. Yeah.
Yes. See, you knew exactly which one I was on about. Let's have a look. We've got some more comments here. Claire says, that's amazing. Does the company stick to one genre or cover different ones?
Different ones, and we actually have two imprints. The company, in fairness, is Livet Ventures, and there's a Livet publishing imprint and Britain's Best Bestseller. Britain's Best Bestseller looks at everything from children's books to autobiographies to horror to fantasy to young adult sci-fi, all of that. And the Livet side looks at has neo-linguistic programming and mindfulness books and Anusha healing books and those kinds of not
Lifestyle.
just self-help, but yeah, lifestyle books. And there's some how to manage your own build if you're building a house, those kinds of things that have a really popular market of their own that I didn't know existed until we inherited these authors that we've been very keen to keep, because they have their own market of readers and popularity that exists in a world I don't necessarily understand, because it's a world adjacent to the one that I exist in, but nevertheless it's fascinating, and their creativity is completely different to the kind that you see in fiction writing and novel writing. It's quite mind-blowing to a certain
That's
extent.
awesome. David, would you mind at some point if you could put the links for both in the comments after we finished or
I
whenever?
will.
That would be great, and then everybody knows where they can find it. Okay, Dawn says, is that Michael Myers mask in the background?
It is Michael Myers' mask in the background. Spotted.
Well spotted, dwarf.
It is.
Eagle eyes over there.
Yeah.
Donna says, oh, wow, David, that's amazing. Claire and I will submit to you then. Oh, I love it.
Shop
Love
around. You might find someone that suits you better, but that we would be honoured to take a look.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that is lovely. Nancy says, are there different publishers for different genres? I've thought about writing a children's book. So yes, there is. For anybody, just as David says, you know, there are many publishing companies out there, obviously in the US and in the UK. If you want to make sure you don't go with a bad one, because as Dave will tell you, there are some really shady companies out there that are awful. If you want to have multiple queries out there, then go to Publishers Marketplace. That will give you all the information of legitimate publishing companies and also legitimate literary agents. And you can also go to Query Tracker, which I love, because Query Tracker actually enables you to track who you've queried and their response and everything else. So yes, go for it. Scott says, great content. I come from a religious church background and have an outline and chapter for a non-fiction book centered around church drama and trauma. I believe it to be a compelling story, but I'm having trouble putting this into a genre. Any advice for identifying a genre? Should this be determined before or after a novel is finished? Ooh, that is a very good question.
I think sometimes it occurs after you've finished, because you don't write your story, whatever it may be, with a genre in mind. You write it, and then you either can easily see where it fits, or you're able to use it as a springboard to find other genres that it might fit in. And some books even create their own. And have done in the past.
Amazon are literally every month are coming up with a new category and new genre. So you're right, it is a very fluid thing. But I would say to you, Scott, if you can figure out what genre it is as you're writing it, it does help build up the anticipation and your readership and following in time for you releasing it. So you're building up interest from people as you're doing it, and you're setting up your platform. So if you can do that, that's great. If not, as David said, it's not a big deal. If you can find books similar to what you're writing on Amazon, how you can then have a look at those authors, see what they're doing, what platforms they're on, and that will give you a very good idea about how they're marketing their book, what type of keywords they're using, hashtags, what people are engaging with. For example, you know, and I'm sure David's done the same. I will go to very well-known sci-fi fantasy authors and see what they're doing and see which posts are engaging people the most, because then I can go, okay, that's the type of thing I need to be doing. It's like trying before you buy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But it's the best way for you. It really is. So if you can figure it out beforehand, it will help you. It will help you. Look at this. Look, Josephine was straight on.
Lorraine Chase. That's the one.
She knew.
Leonard Rossiter was in the advert, wasn't he, on the plane? I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
I loved Lorraine Chase. I thought she was fantastic. God, I've just gone back to my younger days. Oh my gosh. We have got to wrap it up, unfortunately. Can you believe an hour has gone already? If you wanted to ask a question and didn't get a chance, please put them in the comments, because David will be able to see them. We are doing a giveaway, which we're going to do very quickly, because David is going to give away some ebooks. All you have to do is share this interview, and then you will get put into a draw to possibly win an ebook from David. Thank you, David, for a fantastic show. You are so awesome. And I do hope you'll come back on again in the future, because you are an absolute blast.
I would love to. I'd be honoured. Thank you very much for having me, Beth. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Oh.
And thank you to everyone that tuned in.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And join us this Thursday for another Witty Writers Show with Josephine Wrightson, if you like a bit of dark fantasy.
I'll be joining that one.
With a bit of spice. And do go to my author page because I've got a big show coming up soon with Mark Gottlieb. So thank you for joining us. Bye for now and have a fantastic week, everybody.
Stay safe. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.